before. We don't know if it plays out this way. And so I just think the tremendous gratitude from the collective. We've seen Clay get a little weepy or very thoughtful as he talks about the time that he missed with his injury. But even Steph, when he talks about this one hitting different, I asked him about that as we got ready for games, and he just talked about the confidence that the role players had, the way that Draymond and Clay could get back on the floor, and it was like they hadn't missed a beat. And so I just think there's such a tremendous amount of gratitude because I don't know if we remember this, but they weren't even in the bubble. Like they were not good enough to be there, and here they are.
They had the worst record in the NBA what is now 3 seasons ago. 2 seasons ago, they wound up losing out in the play-in tournament, and now here they are, NBA champions. And here's something you never thought you would hear us say. How about the defense that Steph Curry played, particularly last night? Jalen was harping on that in our post-game show last night, that they were hunting him out, and he was ready for the challenge. He was great on both ends of the floor last night.
Absolutely. And Greeny, well, we don't give him enough credit for his being one of the best conditioned athletes of all time. We talk about LeBron James because we know the story and we hear about him spending $2 million on his body. But in order for Steph Curry to do what he did throughout this series and this postseason, being able to be effective offensively, moving without the ball, and then defensively, accepting the challenge against bigger players. You know what, Greeny, Monica? It speaks to the culture as well of the Warriors, which one could argue and say they might have the greatest culture of all time. When you start from the bottom and you look up, you look at Draymond Green, a second-round pick. Yes, Steph and Clay went lottery, but they built it up from the ground surface. And it's almost like a plug and replace. You look at Andrew Wiggins, a guy that people gave up on, doubted because he was the #1 pick, came in and looked like a version of Scottie Pippen in the finals
He did.
Right, and then all of a sudden, Gary Payton II, who played a lot of great minutes and meaningful minutes in the finals, a guy that was on a non-guaranteed contract when he walked into training camp. This is the culture, one of the greatest cultures of all time, and Steph Curry has embodied that. He don't talk a lot, but his leadership goes unnoticed.
Let's talk about that, Wendy, for a moment here. I think that's a really important point that we're making. As we consider whether or not the word dynasty is appropriate for this group, and that's a debate I have a feeling we'll be having all summer, and all of us define that somewhat differently. But it will be defined, first and foremost, by Steph. They have an all-time great player. These will be Steph's teams as we remember them. But they will also be defined by this culture, by their resiliency, by not being a group anyone expected. If anyone had told you when you watched Draymond Green play at Michigan State that he was going to turn into a Hall of Fame player, you would have laughed them out of a room. This is a group that has really done it a very different way than most of the other historically great teams, Wendy, that we have seen.
Yeah, and I think typically we don't see a team win a 4th title and we have a different opinion of them. Typically, when we saw the Bulls, when we saw the Spurs, when we saw, the Lakers, with Kobe, we kind of knew who they were. This team showed us a different side of them, even though it was a lot of the same players. And one of the things that I will take away from this is Steph would admit to you he didn't play his best in the finals in the past. He was not a dog. He had a lot of great games, but he didn't put his best foot forward. And had he not put his best foot forward in this series, they don't win. He bought them time to get better. If you look at the back, Draymond got way better. Klay Thompson got way better. Gary Payton Jr. got his feet underneath him and got better. I would even argue that Steve Kerr, his lineups early in the series weren't working out. He made a lineup adjustment, figured out how to do it. He got better. And so it was really Curry playing a role of sort of all-encompassing star that he had not played before. We'd seen him play it many times in regular season games and other playoff series. We'd never seen it at this level. And so, in a way, even though they had to deal with some adversity, the way it played out was a perfect opportunity for him to satisfy not only the doubters, but to satisfy himself. Because he was proud of himself. I know that in the moment he was saying, now you have nothing to say, but I got to believe deep inside he was extremely proud of the way he performed under this pressure.
Look, you make an incredibly important point. Let's live in that for a moment here. Our job is to live in the day-to-day. We are having these conversations real time, literally every single day. The danger of that is that these are evolving stories. A player's legacy is evolving. It's still evolving. Steph is by no means done. But the reality is, whatever questions used to exist about Steph Curry before these finals were real. They were, is he just part of a great system? Is he part of a great team? He didn't win the previous MVPs. Would he have done it without Kevin Durant? He answered those in this series. I think it is fair to say the questions weren't unreasonable when they were being asked. They were questions. And in the last 2 weeks in particular, Monica, all year long, but the last 2 weeks, he answered them once and for all.
Well, literally, the finals MVP, it closes the door, closes the argument. The one thing that I always kind of pointed out in that discussion was, to me, there's something to be said for a guy that continues to be the cornerstone of a franchise. When we look at this list in terms of guys that, well, MJ went on to the Wizards, but anyway, guys that stay with one organization, right? And so even though people tried to knock him for KD and the talent that was there, to me, and Steve Kerr said it. He gave us this great story about how Greg Popovich always does a toast to Tim Duncan because the Spurs would not be the Spurs without Tim Duncan. And he says he feels the same way about Steph Curry. He has been the cornerstone, the foundation. He's a tremendous leader. I think the way that he instills confidence in those role players, like those role players hadn't been there at all either. He said to me after he didn't hit a three in Game 5, he's like, you know, all good things come to an end, and he's just thankful that he had the support that he had that could step up in such a big way. This has not been an easy road for him physically, mentally. I'm sure he's been challenged as a leader because I imagine you get frustrated with some of those young guys at points. But shout out to the Warriors organization.
Yeah, it is a slightly remade team, and there's a lot of little pieces. They don't win this championship without Andrew Wiggins. There's no way they win this thing without Wiggins playing the way he played in Games 5 and 6. And oh, by the way, did anyone mention Steve Kerr now has 9 NBA championship rings? 3 of them with Michael Jordan, 2 of them with Tim Duncan, and 4 of them now with Steph Curry. And what would a great title team be without at least a little bit of petty? So I take you back to March. Jaren Jackson of the Grizzlies posted a tweet that most definitely came up. The Grizzlies beat Golden State by 28 points in a game where none of the Warriors' big 3 played. And Jaren Jackson Jr. tweeted, "Strength in numbers" after that game. And in case you were wondering if Klay Thompson noticed, listen to this.
Strength in numbers is alive and well. I can't wait. There was this one player on the Grizzlies who tweeted strength in numbers after they beat us in the regular season, and it pissed me off so much. I can't wait to retweet that thing. Freaking bum. I had to watch that. I'm just like, this freaking clown. Okay. Sorry. That memory just popped up. You're going to mock us? Like, you ain't ever been there before, bro. We been there. We know what it takes. So to be here again, hold that.
Okay, and that's not it. You know, Big Perk, even you got a little bit of it last night. Steph Curry had receipts referencing this moment from back in August. Take a listen.
I hate to say this right now, but to be honest with you, I don't see the Golden State Warriors bringing home another championship.
Y'all gonna sit on First Take. You and Dominique Foxworth are going to sit on First Take and say that Steph Curry will not be in the conversation for a championship in the next 4 years.
Clearly remember some experts and talking heads putting up the big zero of how many championships we would have going forward because of everything that we went through. So.
Oh, Big Perk. There we go. Even you were collateral damage last night.
I mean, and Greeny, look, it's part of it. Whatever you need for motivation, and when they go on to win it, guess what? You have to eat that. Yeah. I remember when we won a championship in 2008, Rasheed Wallace was like, "Oh, look, they're not going to win a championship. They don't have a point guard in the center." As soon as we won it, my first interview, I couldn't wait to remind Rasheed Wallace about the words he said about our team. It's part of the game. I'm just happy I'm part of the legacy.
And look, all of this obviously is on some level in good fun. But here's the point. It is instructive. I think it is fascinating to see that in this moment, look at the mountain they just climbed. Yeah. Look at the accomplishment they just gave. Steph Curry last night became one of the Mount Rushmore. No, I'm not going to use that term. But one of the great players.
Here we go.
Let's not get into. He became one of the all-time great players. He became an immortal last night, no ifs, ands, or buts. But he's thinking about this, right? He's thinking about in those moments. That's still there. It is amazing to me, and maybe this is part of what makes you guys the great athletes and the great players that you are, that this stays with you. It bothers you that deeply.
It do, Greeny. And it also shows that they're watching.
Yeah.
They're watching. And Steph Curry is not the one who lash out at people or lash out at media people or whatever throughout the season. He held that receipt. He used it as motivation. And we're talking about a guy that was already a top 15, top 20 greatest player to ever do it. Mm-hmm. But he held his receipts for motivation. And look, you as a former player, I sit up there and I embrace it. I saw it last night.
Yeah.
I saw it last night. I embraced it, but what can I say?
For the record, Big Perk, I'm not going to let you go out there like that. Greeny, I didn't see them here either. In fact, I didn't think there's winning the championship, but I'm on record saying that. But I think that is what makes this organization so unique, right? Because they've developed the guys around Steph. Steph has continued to work on his body. Draymond has continued to be focused. He figured it out throughout the course of this series, and I love when he said, I didn't have a concern that I would not be able to. I knew what I bring to this table. It's just kudos to the entire organization.
Look, I'll admit it, too. On the very first NBA countdown we did together, Stephen A. Smith predicted the Warriors would win the championship. And my thought inside was, well, he's really as crazy as everyone says he is. I didn't see it coming at all. Wendy, how about it? A little bit of pettiness sometimes goes a long way.
Yeah, they have the opportunity to do it now. And, I think 3 years ago, I did a story about Steph's all-time ranking, and I remember talking to Steve Nash about it. And Nash said, I got news for the whole world. He's already an all-time great. I never forgot that, and I kind of agreed with them. But I got to be honest with you, as I've talked about it over the last 3 years, I've had difficulty defending the position of saying he's top 10, top 12, because people would come after you because of the finals record. And I actually kind of backed off saying top 10 because I didn't, even though I felt that way, I didn't have the ammo to make his case for him. And I think that reality nagged at him because he believed it. He believed he was one of the greatest of all time. And people who he respected, like Steve Nash, like Steve Kerr, they believed it too and told it to him too. And yet he had to listen to that he wasn't. And it was somewhat of a fair criticism because the bar, when you talk about that, is so incredibly high. So for him to clear that bar and to clear that bar in this kind of situation, because I know they were the favorites in the bookmakers, but a lot of people thought them as an underdog in this series. For him to do that, it just is such a freeing moment and really is kind of a discussion ender.
Absolutely. Look, it is a nice